there's a difference between being heard and making a difference. In a room filled with world leaders, advisors, and press, two of the most powerful men on the planet didn't negotiate, they shouted. Former US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Not just two names, but two nations, brought to the table not just politics, but pride, pressure, and power. And when pride speaks louder than peace, the world holds its breath. There are moments in life when we are given a platform not just to speak, but to lead. Not just to be seen, but to be remembered for something far greater than titles, positions, or applause. But what happens when the very things that elevated us, our confidence, our strength, our influence, slowly become the same things that blind us? Power, when unchecked, becomes pride, and pride, when left unchallenged, can blur even the clearest of purposes. We've all seen it, not just on the world stage, but in everyday life. A father who wants to lead his family, but ends up controlling it. A boss who started with a vision to empower, but now only demands obedience. A friend who once stood for truth, but now only wants to win the argument. It's subtle. It doesn't happen overnight. Power doesn't corrupt instantly. It seduces slowly. And pride whispers. It tells you, you're right. You know better. You deserve more. Until one day, you stop listening and you start performing. What begins as a desire to make a difference can quietly turn into a desire to dominate. And without even knowing it, we can become more focused on proving ourselves than on fulfilling the purpose we were called for. That's the danger of unchecked power. It makes us think we're untouchable. It convinces us that being right is more important than doing right. It builds walls where there should be bridges, and it replaces compassion with control. We start raising our voices, not because we want to be understood, but because we're afraid of being challenged. We defend our pride, even at the cost of peace. We chase victory, even if it means losing people along the way. And somehow, in all the shouting, in all the asserting, we lose the very reason we started the journey in the first place. The truth is, you can win the battle and still lose the mission. You can walk out of the room thinking, I showed them. But if no one felt seen, no one felt heard, and no one walked away changed for the better, did you really lead? Purpose requires humility. And humility is not weakness. It's strength under control. It's knowing you can speak but choosing to listen. It's knowing you can take credit but giving it away. It's being powerful and still choosing peace. Some of the most unforgettable leaders in history weren't the loudest, they weren't the most aggressive, but they were grounded. Grounded in who they were, grounded in why they were there. They didn't lead from ego, they led from example. And that's the kind of leadership this world is longing for, because people don't remember titles, they remember how you made them feel. They don't remember your position, they remember your posture. Were you approachable? Were you kind? Were you the kind of leader who knew when to speak and when to stay silent? When power becomes a mirror instead of a window, we stop looking outward. We become obsessed with our image, our reputation, our narrative, and without even realizing it, we start serving ourselves more than the people we were meant to serve. But it's not too late. It never is. Sometimes all it takes is a pause, a deep breath, a quiet moment to ask, why am I really here? Am I building something that will last, or just something that looks impressive for now? Because at the end of the day, no position, no victory, no applause is worth it if we lose the heart behind the purpose. Power and pride will try to convince you that louder is better, that bolder is stronger, that winning is everything. But peace is not found in the noise. Peace is found in the quiet strength of a person who knows who they are, why they're here, and what truly matters. And maybe, just maybe, the most powerful thing you can do today is to let go of pride and hold on to purpose. We often think leadership is about being the loudest voice in the room, the one who commands attention with sheer volume and presence. But the truth is, leaders are not measured by how loudly they speak or how forcefully they assert themselves. They are measured by their vision, by the clarity of their purpose, and the depth of their commitment to something greater than themselves. There's a powerful difference between noise and meaning. Anyone can raise their voice and make people stop and listen for a moment. But lasting leadership requires something more. It requires the ability to see beyond the immediate, beyond the chaos, and beyond the distractions. It requires vision. Vision is like a lighthouse in the darkest night. It doesn't shout to be noticed, but it shines steadily, guiding others safely through the storm. It's calm, unwavering, and confident. And it is vision that turns moments of confusion into a path forward. Some of the greatest leaders in history weren't known for their loud declarations or dramatic gestures. They were known for their clarity of purpose, for their ability to look beyond the noise and focus on what really matters: the future they wanted to build, the people they wanted to serve, and the legacy they wanted to leave behind. Visionary leaders don't need to compete with the clamor of the world around them. Instead, they listen deeply, they observe carefully, they understand that real influence is not about overpowering others, but about inspiring them. It's about inviting people into a shared dream and walking alongside them to make that dream real. When leaders focus only on volume, they risk losing the people they want to lead. Shouting can create fear, tension, and resistance. But vision invites trust, hope, and collaboration. It creates a space where others feel valued, heard, and motivated to contribute their best. Visionary leadership is patient. It understands that change doesn't happen overnight. It's willing to navigate setbacks and criticism without losing sight of the goal. This kind of leadership is rooted in conviction, but flexible enough to adapt when necessary. It's confident but never arrogant. In a world where headlines are made by the loudest voices and controversies dominate the conversation, it can be tempting to believe that shouting the loudest is the way to lead. But that kind of leadership is often fleeting, like a firework that dazzles briefly but quickly fades away. True leadership is like a steady flame. It warms, it lights the way, and it endures. It's the kind of leadership that builds foundations, not just for today, but for generations to come. And here's the thing, everyone has the capacity for this kind of leadership. You don't need a title, a stage, or a microphone to lead with vision. Sometimes, leadership begins quietly, in the way you show up for others, the way you choose hope when things seem hopeless, or the way you stay committed to your values even when it's hard. Vision also means taking responsibility, not just for your own success, but for the well-being of the people around you. It's about seeing the bigger picture, understanding how your actions impact others, and choosing the path that leads to healing and growth. When leaders measure their worth by volume alone, they risk mistaking noise for progress. But vision allows us to see what really matters: connection, empathy, and the courage to keep moving forward, even when the way is uncertain. At its core, leadership is an act of service. It's about putting others first, lifting them up, and creating a space where everyone can thrive. Vision gives us the map to do that. It shows us not just where we want to go, but how we can get there together. So if you find yourself in a position to lead, whether in your family, your workplace, or your community, remember this: your power is not in how loudly you speak. It's in the clarity of your vision and the strength of your commitment to make that vision a reality. When you lead with vision, your words don't have to shout to be heard. Your actions will speak louder than any volume ever could. And that is the kind of leadership that changes lives, transforms communities, and leaves a legacy worth remembering. We often forget that every moment, every decision, every word spoken by those in power is being seen not just by the people in the room, but by the world. The world is watching, and it's not just watching for the sake of curiosity or gossip. It's watching because it matters. Because what happens in those moments shapes the future, influences hearts, and sets examples, good or bad, that ripple far beyond the immediate scene. But it's not only the adults who are watching. The next generations, the children, the young people still finding their place in this complicated world are watching too. They are the quiet audience behind every headline, every speech, every confrontation. They are watching to learn what kind of world they are inheriting, what kind of people they should aspire to be, what kind of values will define their lives. This is a heavy responsibility for anyone, especially those who lead nations, movements, or even small communities. Because leadership is not just about today. It's about tomorrow. It's about leaving something behind that will outlast our time on this earth. And when the world and the next generations watch, they're not just looking for power or control, they're looking for character. It's easy to get lost in the moment, to focus on winning an argument, securing a deal, or proving a point. But when you forget that you are being watched, not just by peers, but by young eyes eager for guidance, you start to miss what really matters. You start to lose sight of the legacy you want to leave. The truth is, children don't just watch what leaders say, they watch how they say it. They watch how disagreements are handled, how respect is given or withheld, how strength is shown, not just through words, but through actions. They watch whether leaders choose unity or division, honesty or deception, courage or fear, and they learn from those choices. When leaders shout, when they allow pride to overshadow purpose, when they put personal gain above the common good, the message sent is loud and clear to the next generation. That power is about dominance, not service. That winning is more important than wisdom. That anger and conflict are acceptable ways to solve problems. But when leaders lead with humility, when they listen more than they speak, when they choose peace over pride, the message is just as loud and clear. That true strength lies in compassion, that wisdom is found in understanding, that the greatest victories are those that bring people together. What the world sees shapes what the world becomes. And the next generations will carry those lessons forward. They will either inherit a world fractured by conflict and ego, or a world healed by empathy and vision. That's why every moment counts. Because leadership isn't just about making decisions behind closed doors or speaking on grand stages. It's about the small moments too. The tone you set in meetings, the way you treat your opponents, the example you give in how you handle stress and disappointment. Young people today are more aware and more connected than ever before. They can see beyond the polished speeches and carefully curated images. They see the real people behind the headlines, the true character behind the charisma, and they form opinions. Opinions that will shape how they lead, how they live, how they love. So if you find yourself in a position of influence, remember, you are not just leading for today, you are leading for a lifetime of tomorrows. And those who follow you are watching not just to judge, but to learn. They are watching to decide whether they want to carry the torch you pass or whether they want to light a new one. The world and the next generations need leaders who understand this sacred trust. Leaders who remember that every shout, every gesture, every choice sends a message far beyond the room it's made in. And when the world is watching, the greatest act of leadership is to lead with integrity, with courage, and with a heart open enough to hold not just your own ambitions, but the hopes of those who will come after. Because in the end, leadership is not about being remembered for the noise you made, but for the difference you made in the lives of those who watched you closely and then chose to follow. Sometimes, when we witness conflict, whether between two people, two groups, or even two nations, it's easy to see only the surface, the anger, the raised voices, the harsh words flying back and forth. It feels chaotic, loud, and sometimes even senseless. But if we pause and look deeper, behind every conflict, there's almost always something more vulnerable, more human, a cry for control. Control is a word that carries so much weight. It's about holding on when everything else feels like it's slipping away. It's about wanting to protect what's ours, whether that's our dignity, our beliefs, or even just our sense of stability in a world that often feels unpredictable. When people fight, shout, or push back hard, they're often trying to regain something they feel they're losing. It's not just about power for the sake of power. It's about fear, the fear of being ignored, forgotten, or overrun. To pushe. It's about people full of fear, the fear of being ignored, forgotten, or it's about wanting to be seen and heard when the world feels like it's rushing past. Control becomes a way to anchor ourselves, a way to say, I am still here, I still matter. And when control is threatened, the response can be fierce. We see it in personal relationships when misunderstandings escalate. We see it in workplaces when different visions collide. We see it in politics when leaders refuse to bend or compromise. It's not just stubbornness, it's survival. This cry for control is wrapped in pride, wrapped in pain, wrapped in hope. It's messy and complicated. And sometimes it's hard to tell where the need for control ends and where the fight for respect begins. But here's the thing. Control, when it becomes the goal itself, can destroy what we really want to protect. The harder we grip, the more we risk breaking what's in our hands. And the louder we shout to assert control, the more we risk pushing others away, losing the connection and trust we actually need. True strength is not in how much control we can grab, but in how much we can let go without losing ourselves. It takes courage to loosen our grip and say, maybe I don't have to win this. Maybe there's another way. Conflict is often a sign that something deeper is at stake. A wound that hasn't been healed, a fear that hasn't been spoken, a need that hasn't been met. And when we listen beyond the noise, we might hear the real message. Help me feel safe. Help me feel valued. Help me find my place. When leaders clash, when nations argue, or when even friends disagree, it's a moment to look not just at what's being said, but what's being felt. Because underneath the tension is a call for reassurance, for balance, for respect. If we respond with more control, more force, more shouting, the conflict grows. But if we respond with understanding, with patience, with humility, we open the door to healing. Control isn't something we have to fight for. It's something we can share. It's in finding common ground, in creating space for others to feel safe, in trusting that we don't have to carry the burden alone. And maybe that's the hardest lesson of all, that real control comes not from dominating others, but from mastering ourselves, from choosing peace over pride, connection over conquest. So the next time you see a conflict, whether on the news, in your workplace, or in your own life, try to listen for the cry beneath the clash. Because when we understand that cry, we find a way forward that doesn't destroy but restores, that doesn't divide but unites. Behind every conflict is a heart reaching out, wanting to be understood, wanting to belong, wanting to be seen. Not just for what's on the surface, but for the human being beneath it all. There's a common misconception that power must be loud, aggressive, and unstoppable, that the strongest leaders are the ones who roar the loudest, who shake the room with their presence, who overwhelm everyone with their force. But real power is nothing like that. Real power is calm, not chaotic. True strength isn't about creating noise or commanding attention through volume. It's about holding steady when everything around you is falling apart. It's about being the quiet center in the storm, the unwavering hand when fear and uncertainty threaten to take over. Think about it. When a leader loses their calm, what do we really see? Frustration, desperation, sometimes even panic. And when those emotions take over, Decisions become impulsive, words become sharp, and the path forward gets clouded. Chaos breeds confusion, and confusion erodes trust. But calm power is different. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself because it already knows its worth. It listens before it speaks. It weighs every word and every action carefully. It understands that every choice has consequences beyond the immediate moment. Calm power is patient. It understands that change doesn't happen overnight and that sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is wait, to watch, to learn, to prepare for the right moment to act. It's a power rooted in confidence, not arrogance. In humility, not pride. This kind of power is magnetic. People don't follow because they're afraid. They follow because they feel safe. Because they trust that the person leading them can weather any storm without losing themselves or abandoning those they serve. In moments of crisis, calm power shines brightest. It doesn't shout to drown out fear. It speaks to soothe it. It doesn't push others away, it draws them closer. It doesn't seek to control through force, it leads through example. There's a beautiful dignity in calm power. It respects the voices of others, even when it disagrees. It holds space for dialogue, for understanding, for healing. It knows that true leadership is not about winning arguments, but about finding solutions. And in this calmness, there is also courage. The courage to face hard truths without flinching. The courage to admit mistakes. The courage to put the greater good above personal ego. Calm power is brave because it doesn't need to hide behind anger or chaos. When we think of the leaders who have left lasting legacies, it's often their quiet strength we remember. Their ability to remain composed under pressure, to act with wisdom rather than impulse, to inspire hope rather than fear. We live in a world that often celebrates the loud and the flashy, the quick and the forceful, but those things are fleeting. Chaos is temporary. Noise fades. Calm power endures. It builds foundations that can withstand storms. It creates trust that lasts beyond the moment. It leaves a legacy not just of accomplishments, but of character. And this kind of power is not reserved for a chosen few. It's available to anyone willing to cultivate it. It begins with self-awareness, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, your values and limits. It grows with practice, learning to pause before reacting, to breathe through tension, to choose peace over pride. Calm power is a daily practice, a commitment to being grounded even when everything around you is uncertain. It's in the way you carry yourself in difficult conversations, the way you respond to challenges, the way you stay true to your purpose, no matter what. So if you ever find yourself tempted to believe that you need to shout louder, push harder, or prove yourself more to be powerful, remember this: real power is calm, not chaotic. It's the power that steadies the ship when the waves crash. It's the power that whispers courage when fear is loudest. It's the power that builds bridges when walls are rising. And in that calmness, true leaders are born. But here's what I believe. A shouting match may steal a moment, but character wins the memory. And while the world was watching two men argue, maybe the real lesson was for us to choose peace over pride, to choose listening over leading, and to remember that the future is not built by the loudest voices. It's built by the quiet strength of those who still choose what's right, even when it's not easy. Because leadership isn't about the power to shout. It's about the courage to stay calm in the storm.